discussion on the draft tier map. And we have with us to do the presentation Mr. Peter Ludo, Mr. Steve Ball, and Mr. Charles Rice from our Planning and Growth Management Department.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When last we met, your appointed group of planning folks presented you a template on the tier map, and we left with the instruction to come back with a final map. Mr. Rice has prepared a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to ask him to go through it, and then we'll entertain questions and discussion after that.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. In your board docs is the presentation, and I'll run through that briefly. As Mr. Ludo said at our last meeting, the work group presented a template map with parameters as to how to refine it, and two of those primary parameters were to one, take a more detailed look at the boundaries of Tier 3 and Tier 4 and make those final adjustments based on the dominance of development activity or the presence of farm and forest. And secondly, to look at known failing septic areas to see if opportunities exist to expand Tier 2. So this is the template version that you considered at your last meeting. The next slide shows the polygon areas of which planning staff looked at further. And I'll kind of categorize those into two groups. One is those areas that we looked at where there are known failing septic issues. And the other is where we look to see whether farm and forest dominated or development activity dominated. So I'll actually start with two areas that we looked at regarding failing septics. One is the southernmost polygon of note down around Clifton in the Aqualand area. Staff recommended expanding the area north of Clifton to indicate a Tier 2 opportunity to address the failing septic issues at Clifton. And also noted that expansion of sewer in that area would be in accordance with a Newburgh-Clifton Aqualand sub-area plan, which would ultimately provide recommendations for sewer service in that area, and it would be also preferred as a TDR receiving area. The second area that we looked at regarding failing septics was at Port Tobacco, specifically around the Port Tobacco Riviera development and the surrounding development in that area. That's at the northern part of the Port Tobacco River. We expanded that area of Tier 2 that originally was just the Port Tobacco Village, which was very small, expanded out to include the Riviera development and some other development surrounding that. So that added probably at least another 1,500 acres to that existing Tier 2 village. So the other polygons have to deal with whether or not farm and forest dominated certain areas of significant size, or whether there were opportunities to expand the Tier 3 into some developing or developed areas. So I'll start to the easternmost side. Contiguous with the rural legacy area was a large area of farmland currently that state planning staff had at some point suggested that we should take a closer look at that. And when we did, in fact, there is a large area there dominated by farm land, and we propose to change that from Tier 3 to Tier 4, and it is also contiguous with the rural legacy area. Moving west, we also looked at the area to the east of Port Tobacco River, also dominated by farm and forest. We expanded Tier 4 there. We expanded keep moving north. We expanded a large area to the north of Port Tobacco that was dominated by forest. Originally was in a Tier 3 area, and we changed that to Tier 4, and that's in this north of Port Tobacco area. We'll describe it south of 225. And so then we'll now look finally at the areas that we expanded from Tier 4 to Tier 3. Starting in the west, there was an area south of Marbury that we expanded Tier 3 to encompass some existing development south of Marbury. Moving east, we expanded an area contiguous with what was existing Tier 3. moving further east, expanded another area south to an existing Tier 3 area. Let's see. If we jump down to Dentsville, we expanded an area south to Route 234. That was dominated by development activity, so we added Tier 3 to that Dentsville area. And then finally, in the South Morgantown area, we expanded Tier 3 area in Morgantown to encompass some developed area there. I believe I captured or described the primary changes. If I've missed anything that anyone sees, please let me know.
Did we talk about that?
Yes, the area south of Bellounton was an expansion of Tier 3, and we brought that down to include a couple of little village areas to make it all contiguous there. What are we missing? Okay.
I think that's got it.
So I'll move ahead. That was our county planning staff effort when we met with the Maryland Department of Planning. Some of our areas of interest were common, and the changes that we made were the same. At the end of that exercise, there were 3 areas that the Department of Planning still had concerns about, and those 3 areas are highlighted here on this map. Starting on the eastern side, an area there that is shown as Tier 3. Department of Planning pointed out that currently on the ground there, it is dominated by farm and forest. But when you look at our preliminary subdivision activity map, you'll see that there are several subdivisions planned, even some with preliminary approval in that area. And I would be safe to say that at least 3/4 of that area is either preliminary plan approved or submitted for subdivision activity. So we felt safe that keeping that area as Tier 3 was defensible, and ultimately the state agreed with us on that area. Moving west, this area that we'll call the Bellounton Newtown Road area, the state pointed out that there's a large area there that's dominated by farm and forest. And in fact, when we look closer at that, it is certainly dominated by farm and forest. Probably at least 80% of that area is agriculturally assessed. So we felt it was consistent to change that area to Tier 4. We used Bellounton Newtown Road as the boundary, and east of Bellounton Newtown Road became Tier 4. And then finally, we looked at the area south of Marbury that we expanded from Tier 4 to Tier 3. There was a gap, I guess, between what we'd call 344 and 224, where it was dominated by farm and forest, and we filled that in with Tier 3 to get to the development area south of 344. The state felt that there was too much area included there. We had some discussion, and ultimately we decided it wasn't significant enough, so that we ultimately changed that back to Tier 4. So with that process, we arrived at the last map, which is titled The Final Recommendation. And you can see how Tier 1 through 4 ended up acreage-wise. Not that that's a focus, but I felt like the refinement exercise that we went through was productive, and this is what we're at least calling our final recommendation. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Commissioners, any questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Collins and then Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Rice, thank you. I know at the presentation last week, part of the discussion centered around with the proposed template and now final recommendation, it would require some work from the Planning Commission. Could Could you describe how specific that would be and what would be their charge?
I think from a staff perspective, we wouldn't envision the Planning Commission being involved in the adoption of this tier map unless the commissioners at this point decided they wanted to do that. It would be our recommendation to have the commissioners approve a tier map and then have staff go back and take a look at the draft comprehensive plan to see what changes may need to be made in the plan to rectify it with the tier map. And certainly the comp plan, it would not have to be something that you would start over from square one. At least half the plan would not have to be adjusted as a result of the tier map. There's certain parts, mostly related to the land use map.
So it would be primarily administrative, if you will, because what you're essentially doing is creating a more specific zoning document. Would that be a way to interpret it?
We'd be trying essentially to rectify the land use map that's in the draft comprehensive plan currently with what is the final recommended tier map.
Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
For some clarification, in addition to having the comp plan mirror the tier map, whatever tier map was approved, wouldn't we also, based on some of these tier 2 recommendations, need to update our water and sewer plan as well?
Correct. And when we say update the comprehensive plan, I'm kind of viewing that as all encompassing whatever other plans it impacts. So specifically the water and sewer plan, there would have to be some adjustments to that to recognize the changes at Clifton and Port Tobacco, especially, perhaps Benedict also. And I'm not totally familiar, but I believe we're in the process of updating that plan now anyway, so timing would be good.
And so would I also be correct in stating that until what's earmarked to be tier 2 has water and sewer, it is essentially tier 4 until we add the sewer?
Certainly you couldn't move forward until it becomes part of the plan. So logically, yes, that's how the order would proceed.
Well, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
No. I would just like to thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thanks for the hard work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so if I understood your recommendation, it's that we take action on this presentation, this recommendation, or that's what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay, so commissioners, what's your pleasure? Is there a motion to adopt the tier maps?
I would just like to remind everyone that I think we had a motion that was tabled from last week. Do we need to address that, or do we just need to ignore it?
I have a question, Mr. Rice. Is there anything, I had a conversation with you yesterday, is there any more land by law that we're allowed to build in that wasn't put on this map? Where you have water and sewer?
I think
That
you're
were
referring to the Deferred Development District.
Sure. The Deferred Development District has been one of those areas of discussion. And since the early parts of this process, there's been one train of thought that the Deferred Development District could go one of two ways. Since it is indicated as ultimately planned for sewer service, even if it is further out, one could say that it would be consistent with the septic build to have that area as Tier 2. Also, we felt that it would be consistent to have that area as Tier 4 given the criteria in the septic bill. So I think some of the earlier versions had that as Tier 2 at one time. We switched to Tier 4. From a staff perspective, in a current day scenario, we can point to more provisions in the septic bill that justify it as being Tier 4 today, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't also be Tier 2 and still meet the criteria of the septic bill.
And that would follow state guidelines too, correct?
From a staff perspective, we believe it would.
So we could reserve a little more land to do something. Okay.
Well, there was, if I could just comment on that, there was other reasons why it was recommended to be a Tier 4 area, and the reasons is because there's policies in the comprehensive plan, both in the current adopted plan and in the recommended draft plan, that indicates that the deferred development district will not be released for development at this time. The policy basically states that we will consider releasing development from the deferred development district at least every 5 years, or with the update of the comprehensive plan. And that issue was revisited by the Planning Commission, and their decision and direction to you was not to release it at this time for new development. So in that respect, it makes more sense to remain as a Tier 4 area until such time areas are released. And we actually have an application to do that for a particular project. But we don't want to be in a situation where we have policies that say one thing and a map that says something else.
Okay. Is there a way that you could show us on a map, especially because I'm looking at area that I know is planned for sewer, that where you can show us that in a Tier 2 format? Could you do that for us?
We could. It would be a fairly easy exercise since the development district's already a polygon in our GIS, so we could go back and do that.
Can you just outline it, do you think?
What area?
Well, you know, near our tech park and near our airport, I think that area is on the deferred development district, and I think since there is a difference in opinion, I think since it's planned for sewer, we can make that a Tier 2.
It looks like it is Tier 2.
Can we?
It's essentially the area north of 225.
Yeah. Yep.
So if you see here is 225, so it would encompass this large area north of 225. Now, I will say there is quite a bit of protected land already within that area. And without knowing closer what the numbers are, but being familiar enough, I'd venture a guess that somewhere close to half of the deferred development district probably is either already protected with a lot of state-owned land. You have Chapman's Forest, you have Myrtle Grove Wildlife Management Area, and a recent acquisition by the state closer to Pomfret. With those areas and the resource protection zone, I'd venture to say you'd be getting close to half of the deferred development district already protected, and thus could stay in a Tier 4 status while the rest could be Tier 2.
Madam Chair, could I ask staff to change that or to do that? The areas in the development district, the resource protection areas in the development district, just to see a map that looks like that.
We could do that, and I probably, if we broke for 10 to 15 minutes, I could probably bring that back.
If you would.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While they're doing that, are there any other
Anything
maps?
else? So yeah, it would be nice to see this, and if we all agree on it, we get the thing done today, if everybody agrees on it.
Okay.
We're here to tweak it, so let's get it done.
Well, anything else you want to see? Any other areas?
I still have the procedural question that I threw out there, which hasn't been answered. I just want to know how we can we ignore what happened last week and just move forward, or do we have...
Just going back over the procedure where we are. Last week you did make a motion to go ahead and have the issue of adopting the what had been presented originally as the tier map tabled. That's going to need to be removed from the table, at which point you will need to go ahead and take some action on it. It looks like if...
Well, that was only part of the motion.
I'm sorry?
That was only part of the motion.
The other part of the motion is to adopt what's before you.
No, the first part of the motion was to reject what was
presented.
And then the other part was, obviously, I would need to amend the second part because what's presented to us today is not what was presented to us on March 4th.
Week. Right. So you have to amend it to look at what it is that's being presented to you all today.
Okay, so I'm just going to suggest that we wait until after the break. And,
Commissioner Collins, did you have something, a map or something you wanted?
No, it's still... I think I can hold off on that question.
Well, anything else that could be either or, specifically with the deferred development district and our resource protection areas, that would be a good big help. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll take a 15 or 10 minutes. What do you think, Mr. Rice? 10 minutes enough?
10 to 15.
Okay, we'll say 15 minutes.
If I'm lucky, I may be able to catch my GIS person.
Okay. 15 minutes? Back, ladies and gentlemen, and staff have returned with the overlay, or I guess the new map, depicting where in the deferred development district it could be possible to do a tier 2. These are lands that are not already in conservation or preservation. So, Mr. Rice, you want to pick it up from there?
Sure. So the map that you have in front of you on the screen and the hard copy, what we did was turned on the deferred development district as tier 2, and the deferred development district is 18,000 acres. And it's kind of ironic, but when you turn on the protected lands map, which includes the state-owned properties, other preservation there, and the resource protection zone associated with Mattawoman Creek, it is within like 5 acres of exactly half that would be already protected and would remain in Tier 4, and the other half going to Tier 2. So 9,000 one way and 9,000 the other. Would have never guessed it would be that close at this scale, but it is. So
we have 18,000 total acres in the deferred development district. Of that, 9,000 acres were already in conservation.
Correct.
Okay, and is there any opinion or any feedback in terms of how this fits in with the law or what have you? And I think Commissioner Robinson has a question, so it may piggyback on that.
We believe that it is consistent. The staff from Maryland Department of Planning is here. If you would like to get an opinion from them, they're certainly available.
My question is, how does this Tier 2 land that has just been added to the map impact the Mattawoman watershed? Because it looks awfully close.
Well, by showing the resource protection zone as Tier 4, you're capturing that floodplain area, streams associated with Mattawoman. So you have that protection shown in the Tier 4 status. Outside of that, we have other protections with soil conservation and sediment erosion control plans associated with development. At one point, there was a recommendation by the Planning Commission to look at ways to expand the resource protection zone in that area beyond what it is now through adjusting our existing regulations. So that's something that we could bring forward in the future. So there are other ways of getting at that too.
But your position is that this is perfectly legal.
We feel this meets the intent of the septic bill. Yes.
And Mr. Hall, do you agree?
Person saw the map, and we, as the hope's been demonstrated, obviously want to work with the county, we had a recommended map to go with you tonight that you saw from staff earlier. But deferred development district is it's been in place since at least the early 90s, it is an area planned for sewer, but for very, very long extent as far as the outer limits of foreseeable development. What I can tell you from our growth model is that within the Tier 1 on that map right now, there's enough development supply to accommodate the total county projection up to 2035. Is more than enough. So what I would suggest is that the county take a look at how much of new area for sewer they need within a planning horizon, within increments of time. I think that we'd be glad to look at it and get back to you in more detail. Certainly, some of it is probably fine. I mean, that's a significant addition. So it's hard for me to sit here on the spot and say, sure, we're totally fine with it. again, for some of the areas that may be of the key interest to the county that they want to be in Tier 3, maybe those could be focused on more, and those could be perhaps a higher priority to bring into Tier 1 and Tier 2 in the future. Taking off the whole new amount of development one bite seems like an awful lot, and I know the need for the full deferred development district for future growth has been debated for a long time. Certainly some of it makes a lot of sense, but to just throw all that on there right now without us looking at it, I can't tell you a whole lot about where we'd end up on it.
Mr. Hall, I guess my question is, I understand, the concept behind Tier 2, but comparing that to the March 11th map, and it just seems that we're, when we go back to do the comp plan in light of this, would that not mean that these areas would all be projected to be made a part of our water and sewer plan? And no? And then because we're putting water and sewer there, or projecting water and sewer there, wouldn't that indicate that we're looking for high-density development? I mean, obviously, when you run sewer lines, you're going to get it's going to be much more costly. So that's what, I understand that 2 is viewed as 4 for the time being, but I don't know how, just looking at this, how this couldn't force our hands with a comp plan that would not, I'm speaking for myself, be the direction I'd see that would be appropriate to go.
Well, Tier 2 is for areas that the local government plans to extend central sewer, which, again, planning 101, as you all very well know, is that you extend sewer where you want the dense development, or at least compact, right, your growth area. And even the Tier 1 today is not built out by any means. Like I said, there's enough capacity for 20 more years of growth just within Tier 1. That's if all the growth went into Tier 1, which we all know it won't do. I guess the other thing I would say to you is that I encourage you all to keep in mind that this map is not going to be chiseled in stone. The tier maps are meant to be dynamic, just like your local planning processes. You revisit your comp plan every so often, and the other plans. So, again, we're more than happy to work with the county to figure out what our recommendation would be for how much Tier 2 to add. Just sitting here seeing it for the first time, that looks like a lot to add in. There may be subsets, may be a priority for the county to add in now, and then revisit it when you get further down the road. And the growth pressure suggests that you need to add more supply to the demand. It's a supply-demand type piece, and part of the septic bill does speak to Tier 2 areas having a relationship being linked to what the demand is for future growth. So that's part of the language on Tier 2.
And we're saying that by making this Tier 2, that this would be our future growth. In other words, if as you do your water and sewer plan, and you plan out your water and sewer, this is already, by putting it in Tier 2, and then assuming you would match up a comp plan to correlate with that, we're essentially saying that this is, at the time that we have a water and sewer plan that supports it, this would be developed. And I understand what you're saying, that these are fluid things and these could change, but that's what this tier map says, right?
The tier map, if this was your tier map, it would say it's the county's plan to develop those areas as your development district.
Mm-hmm. But it's perfectly legal, from what we're hearing, at least from Mr. Rice, it said it's a legal map. It's just that along with that comes the understanding. So now, even if it's legal, then it comes down to, do we feel this is the way that we want to go?
Well, I'm not prepared to say right now and tell you for certain it's legal. Again, I've seen this for 10 minutes. And there is provision in the legislation that speaks to Tier 2 having some relationship to supply and demand for future growth. We'd be glad to do a deeper dive into that tomorrow. But I can't tell you right now off the top of my head exactly whether this would be legal or not. I think that given that the plan that would support this map or something close to it would need to be sent back to your planning commission anyway. That's certainly something you all could direct them to look at. What of that area would the planning commission suggest be highlighted for going forward? And I would also recommend that the county would look at impacts to the man and woman watershed. I realize that there are some protected lands there along the immediate stream corridor, but for a watershed as important as the man and woman, I'd recommend that that be looked at as well for this area you're considering adding.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, a couple of things related to Tier 2. Anytime we designate anything as Tier 2, there would be, if we went to actually implement anything, a tremendous price tag, because it's not inexpensive to add water and sewer. My other concern about this particular area being Tier 2 is it sends the absolute worst message imaginable. I mean, we have heard for years how threatened the Mattawoman watershed is, and this is just too close. That this is one part of the county that makes me most uncomfortable to send the message that this will someday be Tier 2.
Yes, sir. Okay, Commissioner Collins?
The implementation guidance for the Sustainable Growth and Agricultural Preservation Act of 2012 document for Senate Bill 236. The plain meaning of what Tier 2 is under Section 2, which describes Tier 2 areas, are areas that are one, planned to be served by public sewerage systems and in the municipal growth element, or mapped locally designated growth areas. The plain meaning certainly suggests that you could certainly make the argument that this is Tier 2, but I also understand, just describing some of the potential limitations, but because this has been in the county's planning for years in terms of the deferred development district and the recognition that that area would probably not see any degree of growth until after 2035 anyway. I think it's an impression, but I think it's a stretch to also state at this time that somehow there's going to be these tremendous costs associated with this area that hasn't been developed up to this point anyway. I believe that certainly there are arguments on both sides, but reading the plain meaning, in the actual language in the implementation document, it certainly seems to suggest that it wouldn't be out of line for the county to consider that a part of Tier 2.
I would just say that the Deferred Development District has been around forever, and that's why it's an old vehicle for development. And since that time, since that land was carved out and put in the Deferred Development District, we've made lots of progress in terms of what we've done in our development district, the growth of that area. Now we've put in place a work which is going to require that we focus, all of our development, or not all, but a good bit of development into that area in order to be able to receive the kind of funding necessary to improve our transportation and light rail and so forth. So it doesn't make any sense to me to take this area that is pristine, necessary, we managed to protect it all this time, necessary for the protection of the Mattawoman, and knowing that we really, if we're saying that we don't need it for any time in the near future, I see no purpose in putting that there except to encourage speculation and demand for water and sewer, and to do sprawl development as well. I just don't see any benefit to doing that, and so.
Okay.
But
Could I speak, please?
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. I think what we're doing is we're confusing the state's mandate of SB 236 and local comprehensive planning. We get to decide that. That is something we do. Where we build and where we don't build is something that we do, and we do local. Now, the state is requiring us to designate based on their definitions of what we want to do with land. That's fine. And this fits into the definition because it is land set aside for projected sewer in the future. It meets the plain definition of it. All this hyperbole about not protecting lands and sprawl development, that has nothing to do with a tier map that designates where we expect to have sewer in the future. We still plan locally. And Secretary Hull, we plan local. You mentioned yourself just now that it's a local planning issue. I'd like to get this tier map behind us so we can move forward with local planning.
And I absolutely agree that this is local. And we want to follow the law. I'm merely stating that it is local, and therefore it's important for me as an elected official when I look at this to say this really is troubling to me, and therefore I can't support it. So I couldn't agree more.
I think messaging is important, and I think designating this in Tier 2, Commissioner Collins is absolutely right. We're not going to be spending a dime on any of this water and sewer in that area should it be designated Tier 2. But it's sending the wrong message. Let's look where redevelopment needs to take place, right, and where development should take place, because there's a lot of room for that here in Charles County. I just don't think, and I'm repeating myself, that that's the area to focus on.
And my question would be, why would we be doing that? I mean, if we know that this isn't going to happen for many, many years, if we know that we're not going to be spending money to build water and sewer lines, why would we want to do it? It's
our option. We've already reserved.
It's our option. Help me to understand, why would you want to do something?
Want me to answer you?
Yeah, my question is, why would we want to do something when we don't have to, and it really flies in the face of what we're hearing feedback on is the future. It's not going to change anything in the short term, and it's about sending a message about how we protect our resources.
Because it's within the law. Because it's within the law, and we can. We're looking for some type of...
So it's because we can.
You want me to finish answering your question, Candace? We're looking for some type of agreement. I think this is something that I could agree with. I do not know why it was Tier 4 when it could be Tier 2. We've already protected over 50% of our land, of the county's land, over 50% in Tier 4. I think in the spirit of negotiation, in the spirit of compromise, the idea of finding some land that could be Tier 4 or Tier 2 and making it Tier 2 is in the spirit of compromise. That's all. I know you don't want to compromise. That's fine.
No.
But that's my position.
My question is, why are we compromising? Why are we compromising? Why?
Because we can. That's what a compromise is.
Okay, but I'm asking you, why is it that we want to remove... Why do we feel that we need to put this in there?
Why is it so important to put it in Tier 4? If we're not going to develop it, I make the same argument to you. I make the same argument to you. If it doesn't matter because that it's in Tier 2, it doesn't matter if it's in Tier 4.
And because the merge scenario, the one that was universally supported, my question is, why would you want to go against that?
If I could maybe
Thank you.
comment a little bit on the comprehensive plan policies, might help to answer that question. The policy, the reason that it was originally put in Tier 4 is because of the policies that are in the comprehensive plan. Of course, it's up to the commissioners to change the policy. Policy right now is to revisit it on a 5-year basis at a minimum, or as part of the update with the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission made that determination and analysis and said, well, we don't really need it to meet our growth needs. Mm-hmm. Let's look at it, in the future, in the next phase of the comprehensive plan. So we have a project right now that's applied to amend the comprehensive plan to take land out of the deferred development district for development. The questions that we're raising are policy questions for that project. How much, when, where? Do we have a logical plan to release development from the development district and provide it on sewer? And right now we don't have that. We don't have a determination that says okay, we'll release 100 units every year, or we'll release these geographic areas for development. Right now, our policy is we're going to look at it on a 5-year basis at a minimum, and that's why it was proposed as it was. If you want to change it, that's certainly within your purview, but that's the reasoning behind it.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I believe that...
What about Mr. Lyons? Mr. Lyons? Is there something with Mr. Lyons? No?
I think that that Secretary Hall indicated that he needed some time to provide comments to this.
If I may, I was handed the language from the legislation. There's a couple parts to it for Tier 2. As Commissioner Collins correctly pointed out, it needs to be planned for sewer, just as Tier 2 definition. Also map the locally designated growth area. The other component on here, the part I was referring to a few minutes ago, it says it's needed to satisfy the demand for development at densities consistent with the long-term development policy after consideration of the capacity of land areas available for development, including infill and redevelopment within the local jurisdiction. So, in shorthand, that's supply-demand. Again, I think to Commissioner Davis's point, there's sort of broader growth policies here, and then you all trying to do this tough job. Both of them are tough, dealing with the tier map. And I think with putting all that on there, just from a straight-up planning perspective, just sitting here tonight seems like a lot to me, and in the middle of an important resource. And Steve Ball mentioned the 5-year look. If you want my recommendation, I would say perhaps put some of it in there as a priority for you as a county, and then look at it every 5 years to see what the growth pressures are and what the priorities are for the county, and add it in as you need it. As whether or not this is the straight up question, is this legal? A legal map, it really depends, again, how one interprets that last provision I just read. So I can give you a better answer if I have a little bit of time, a day or so, but this is I'm just telling you what's in the legislation right now.
Okay, well, thank you, and I think the commissioners will make a decision as to whether or not but I appreciate your candor, and it does sound like we're kind of to go either way with this. It's certainly legal, so I'm guessing there's a motion.
If there's an issue as to whether it's certainly legal, we do have legal counsel here. If you guys have an issue with whether it's legal or not.
Well, my guess is that you all have already spoken with him. So, is there a motion, Commissioner Davis? Do you want to make a motion to adopt this tier map?
I'm not sure that this is a tier map that's been addressed to us.
I think we have the tier map, and this is what...
Well, we said last week we're going to sit here and work it out, and I thought we were working it out. I mean, that's what we discussed last week in session.
Well, I mean, listen...
I think it's a great compromise from both maps.
I mean, I know that several of the commissioners have been meeting with Mr. Warren Rich, so they feel comfortable, and... it's a little bit of a surprise to me, but the legal piece of it isn't the issue for me right now. I just find this is just not the way I want to see the county grow. But this is what this is about.
And the tier map is not about where we want to see the county grow, Candace. It is not.
Well,
the comp plan is where we see the county grow.
This is true, but this is sort of a guideline. And we all have a right to our opinion. So do you want to make a motion? Let me just say that, or do you want to give Mr. Hall additional time?
I'd like to move that we adopt the tier map as presented before us.
Could we procedurally remove the motion from the table?
I'm going to get to that one. Okay, so we have a motion that we are going to, that motion should be to remove it from the table. Let's just remove it from the table and we'll start fresh. Remove it from the table, and we're going to just let that die, correct? Or is there a certain process you would like for us to take?
Commissioner Robinson can ask to have it removed from the table, and his motion, as I recall that it was to reject the BGI map and adopt what is before you.
So what?
That was from last week.
Motion. So would you like to remove that from the table, and then we'll just move forward, Commissioner Robinson?
That was his motion. I'm sorry.
Well, my motion doesn't make any sense right now, considering that the map before us has changed twice now.
Exactly.
So I will just remove the motion and let it die.
Ms. Ferguson, is that adequate for your minutes?
Sure.
Okay. And then, Commissioner Davis, if you'd like to start fresh with your motion.
What do we call this map?
Mr. Rice, the one that gets brought us.
The latest... The latest rice map.
The tier 2.
I would never say that.
You want to call that?
I would like to move to adopt the latest map submitted by Mr. Rice during this session. That's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rucci. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed. Okay. Well, there you have it, folks.
Maryland Department of Planning for review and comment. We'll also proceed with updating the comprehensive plan per the notes on the map and bring that back for your review and consideration.
Very good. Commissioner Robinson?
Regardless of the map that we just passed, I would like to revisit the other recommendations by the working group regarding agriculture, and I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to give us a presentation on the cost analysis related to the, I don't remember how many recommendations it was, that was part of the report that you presented to us last week.
And is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. And you can already look at what we have in that budget, gentlemen, for the PDR. There's some money in there already.
Yes, there is.
Who seconded that?
It was a motion by Commissioner Robinson, second by Commissioner Rucci. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. And let's see. And I think that's it for right now. Is there anything else that we need to do with regard to this? Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. And if there are any of the committee members here, I see Mr. Meeker's here. Thank you. And I thought I saw Mr. Lyons. Thank you for your time. Okay, so next we have old business.